and kind of bear with us. So anyway, here we go. So first of all, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mike Long again. I'm a member of Sustainable Essex. I want to welcome you to our 5th session in our Sustainable Essex Environmental Discussion Series. And we've titled this series as What Do We Do with Our Old Computers, or Managing the Impacts of Electronic Waste. Important topic, a topic that's becoming more significant almost on a daily basis. And joining me today are 4 experts in this area. Kevin Sullivan is the Supervising Environmental Analyst with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Gina Chiarella is the Chief Executive Officer for Take-Two Incorporated. Take-Two is Connecticut's only certified electronic waste processor. Along with Gina is Stacy Gray, who is the Business Development Manager with Take-Two, and she's going to be driving the slides as Gina and Stacy take you through their presentation. And finally, we've got Pam Roach. Pam is a consultant with the South Central Council of Governments, and she's president of the Connecticut Recyclers Coalition. So we've got a really great group of facilitators who are expert in this area, and I think we're going to get some really great information from them today. And I thank them in advance for all the work and time they've put into this. Before I turn it over to Kevin to start, I just want to cover a couple of quick logistical items with you. All the participants except those who are facilitating will be muted. We're going to do that just to kind of reduce any background noise. We will address all questions after the completion of Pam's presentation, but you can begin, as you think of a question, you can begin to type those questions into chat, and you can access the chat box by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. And a couple of other things. Again, this is titled the Sustainable Essex Environmental Discussion. So I want to stress the word discussion, and I want to stress that your comments and not just your questions are encouraged, they're welcomed, especially about how individual households or your community can address the challenges of electronic waste. And then after the session today, what I'll be doing is sending all of you a document that provides additional links for other resources. We'll also make a copy of all 3 presentations available to you. And we are recording this session, and we'll make that available to you as well. I'll provide a link to you as soon as we get that up and running. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, I'm going to bring up, let me share my screen here. Bear with me for 1 minute. Let me bring up your presentation. And Kevin, you can just walk me through, what slide you want me to go to. So at that, let's see here. There we go. So Kevin, I'll turn this over to you, and I'll change screens as necessary.
Great, thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here today with you. You can actually start with the second page of the presentation that I sent to you, titled "Household Electronic Waste Recycling in Connecticut."
Okay, we have that up.
Yeah, thanks for kind of giving me that feedback. I'm going page to page with you on my own screen separately. The electronics waste recycling law in Connecticut is an extended producer responsibility program. Another name for it is a shared responsibility program, and that's mostly because it brings manufacturers into the mix, and I'll go over some of the roles of the various parties in a minute. I'm going to try to quickly summarize the history as I've seen it, and go over the particulars, give you an overview of the particulars of the Connecticut law. And then I think the idea is for Gina to follow up with some of the nuts and bolts that she deals with as a recycler. And then Pam is going to go over to give us a broader look at EPR and other recycling programs.
Right.
So next slide, please.
Okay,
So
I've got that up.
what is the e-waste problem? I think by the early 2000s, we were seeing a lot of electronics show up in the municipal waste stream. It was not illegal to dispose them in the trash. So many towns were trying to do the responsible thing, along with regions, had money in their budgets to recycle, to hold separate collections for e-waste recycling. And they did quite a good job with that. There was some state funding at the time, as they were often done in tandem with household hazardous waste collections. As the grant funding dried up and more e-waste collected, it became quite a financial burden for towns. So what we had was an end-of-life management program for e-waste, but without the shared responsibility, the financing and the liability for the collection and where the materials were going, and making sure that the processing was safe. That all fell to the towns that were trying to do this good thing. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Around the same time, we were also beginning to learn more about what was going on around the world with the electronics that we were getting rid of. There was all sorts of informal smelting going on. The first picture there happens to be from China, could be just about anywhere in the third world, second or third world. There was a lot of open burning, and all of that was aimed at trying to extract the more valuable components of the electronics. Next slide, please.
Okay.
There was also outright bad disposal going on. I think this was a relatively well-known case of somebody, I believe it was an irresponsible recycler, had agreed to take care of the e-waste of a local university, and they put some of it in a boat and sank the boat in the lake. And the liability for that cleanup, I believe, fell to the university from which those electronics came. So next slide, please.
Okay.
So with all those things going on, there became recognition that we needed to do something different. And in 2007, the legislature acted. From my observation, I remember seeing Pat Widlitz, the former state rep from Guilford, being a leader on the issue. There was also Peg Hall, solid waste manager from the town of Branford. And they saw that Maine, a nearby Northeast neighbor, had a really good law. So they took a look at that and borrowed its best parts and got a law passed in 2007, and it was modified in 2008. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So some of the themes and particulars about the law. Covered electronic devices is what the law applies to. It only applies to those devices. The roles for the shared responsibility approach are that towns provide the collection site, and they are only allowed to use the recyclers that are approved to manage the e-waste that's collected. The residents have the role of dropping off their CEDs at the collection point, and they have a limit of 7 they can drop off at any one time. Manufacturers bear the cost of the recycling, so they do that by reimbursing the recyclers. And the recyclers are vetted and approved by DEP, including the price per pound that they charge to manufacturers. And they are required to follow the standard recycling practices. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So initially there were three types of devices covered by our law: computers, which would include laptops, monitors, and televisions. And there was also a provision in the law that allowed for adding additional devices through regulatory action. Also in the law was provision for DEP to develop regulations to enforce the conceptual guidance of EPA called plug-in to e-cycling, and that was guidance document of theirs. So why would we need recycling standards? You would think everybody would want to do the right thing. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot going on in electronics. There are many different useful, recyclable, valuable materials. There's a short list there: copper, aluminum, steel, gold. Not so much gold anymore, but initially there was. There's also a lot of fairly nasty components and ingredients in e-waste. There, in televisions and monitors, there used to be a lot of lead and CRT glass, the CRT type of monitor and television. Circuit boards can also have lead. If there's mercury backlighting in a screen, or even with some of the older devices, there were PCBs and capacitors, and those were referred to in the guidance as material of concerns. So you can see that there's a lot going on, and to make sure they all went to a responsible destination and were recycled to the best extent possible, you might need to have some clear standards to go along. Next slide, please.
All set?
So DEP got the regulations adopted in 2010, and a lot of that had to do with those recycling standards for the primary metals and the MOCs. That regulatory action also added printers to the list of covered devices. 2011 is when we finished approving the recyclers for the first time and started collecting. I think it was February of that year. Next slide, please. Okay. So an overview of the outcome of the law: costs were lowered for municipalities. Less e-waste was disposed in the trash. I forgot to include this, but I believe there was a solid waste audit that was done a couple of years ago by DEP, and the electronic waste that was disposed in the trash went down from, I believe it was 7% to a little over 2%. So there was a measurable effect there. Residents had free and convenient drop-off. Most of the locations were at town transfer stations where people would be familiar with where to go. And in some cases before the law, people were paying fees to drop off their electronics. That's no longer the case to use one of these locations. The recycling cost became built into the price of the device, which we believe is a fair way to do that. There were enforceable recycling standards that were clear and created a level playing field for the recyclers. It helped to grow recycling markets and create green jobs. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So some numbers for you from 2011 to the last year, 2019, that we have vetted numbers. Over 137 million pounds of e-waste was collected through this program. I think that's pretty impressive for a small state. And just looking at the savings versus disposal, that saved over $6 million for municipalities, and 73 jobs were created in Connecticut and 13 more elsewhere in the Northeast. Next slide, please.
Okay.
I was asked how we decide whether we were doing a good job of collection in Connecticut, and we had it was not in the law, but internal to DEP, we developed an informal goal of 4 pounds per capita. That was consistent with what was going on at the time nationally, as far as what states were using for goals. And we did achieved that goal. We peaked around 2014 and 15 at about 4.25, and that's now actually down to a little over 3 pounds per capita. We don't think that's due to lack of participation. We think it's due, and we pretty much know it's true, devices are getting smaller and lighter. And a lot of that has to do with a declining percentage of televisions and monitors being collected now are no longer the heavy CRT type of device. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So now that we're up to today, and knowing we probably have some municipal officials on the phone today, I thought I would bring up a couple of current issues that we're trying to get the word out on. And that is to impress upon people that we're really trying to discourage scavenging. But once an electronic device, a covered electronic device is left at its collection location, usually the transfer station, there's actually a state solid waste law that prohibits scavenging. And the practical reason for that with electronics is it's a huge data security risk for the user that drops off. They have faith that the item is going to be recycled, or if it's reused, the recyclers are required to wipe the data from the device or the component. So we really need to honor that commitment. Next slide, please.
Okay.
For swap shops, that doesn't mean we want to discourage swap shops by any means. We love them. But there is a data security risk, so we want to remind people that are dropping off covered electronic devices that some of them may be a data security risk. And even the newer smart televisions may contain sensitive data on them, so that's another thing that we need to start watching. And some of this falls on the heels of a recent audit performed by a television manufacturer where a GPS device was placed inside one of their televisions and left at a Connecticut transfer station. Within 2 days, they tell us that television wound up at a residence in Connecticut, which is not what was supposed to happen to it. So if there were any sensitive data on that television, had it been left by a private citizen, that television, the person who took that device could be using that data against the person that dropped off that device, and that's definitely not a good thing. Next slide, please. Another current issue is some municipalities have negotiated getting rebates and credits from the CERs. The law is not honestly entirely clear about this, but DEP believes that the law was not intended to generate revenue for collection of the covered electronic devices. It raises costs for manufacturers, and manufacturers were part of the dialogue when the law was developed. So we feel to honor the commitment that we made to manufacturers when the law was negotiated, it's most fair for them not to have to bear the cost of something like a rebate. And rebates, in theory, may put some pressure on some recyclers to cut costs and potentially jeopardize safe recycling. Next slide, please.
All set.
Not sure, sometimes questions come up these days about how COVID-19 has affected e-waste. I think I know a little bit about it, and maybe Gina can go into this if there's time later, so I'm sure she knows much more about it. Our program here in Connecticut for CEDs really hasn't been affected very much. None of the recyclers have stopped operation for any length of time. I think there was more of a problem with the collection locations, in some cases shutting down. Some of the regional one-day collections have been canceled. But collection rates, I think, have actually been on average about as expected. Initially, the rates were down a little bit as collection slowed when the virus first hit. But I understand that collection rates are maybe even a little higher than normal a little bit later on, because people that were either out of work or working at home were taking time to clean stuff out, and that included electronics. I also understand that computer reuse demand for it is up along with parts, and that some commodity prices are actually up a little bit because supply chains have been disrupted so much that in some cases that has caused a shortage of materials from electronics components to be used as raw materials. Next slide, please.
All set.
So I'll throw these out as some of the issues that DEP sees for the future of e-waste recycling, but I think Pam will probably develop these ideas a little more fully. Some of the challenges that we see are that we know that there are lower prices in the commodities market, so that makes it harder for recyclers to survive at the prices that they've set and that we've approved. There's many more types of devices and that's on the market, and that evolves very quickly. It's difficult sometimes for us to even tell a manufacturer whether their device is covered by our law or not, and whether we should be looking into modifying the law to cover new devices. I think I mentioned earlier that devices are getting smaller and lighter. Does that mean our program is becoming less effective if the total weight collected is going down? I don't think so, but it is harder to communicate that, I think. CRT glass markets are shifting, and the amount of CRT glass being collected is going down. There's a question about where mercury is going. I think it's largely being stored. So there tends at the moment to be, I believe, a bit of a glut in storage, which is not a good to have that sitting around. DEP staff is likely to dwindle in the future. I think everybody sees state budgets getting tighter, and it's going to be harder to have available resources for inspection and enforcement of the recycling standards. So we'll have to see how that evolves. And we've done surveys a couple of different times. They're not particularly scientifically large enough to consider a great survey, but we think we've gotten good enough information from what we've done to know only about 60% of the staff even know about the e-waste law we have in Connecticut. And I think it was about 40% knew of an existing location. So we've got a ways to go with outreach. This I'll leave more to Pam. I think I'm probably going a little longer than I had planned. Should we be doing things like expanding the entities that can be involved in the program? Right now it's just residents in Connecticut. Some states like Maine, that was our model, also include schools and small businesses and nonprofits. Should we go in that direction? How about the devices covered by the law? State like New York and Europe have long had kind of like an everything with a plug model. And then EPR itself can be expanded. We already have mattresses and paint EPR in Connecticut. Batteries was close, but didn't actually happen a couple of years ago. And solar panels are being installed a lot these days, which is great. But what are we going to do when they need to be decommissioned? And I understand Pennsylvania has a proposed bill for solar panel EPR that's gaining some attention. So I think that's it, I hope in brief, and I hope it didn't go too long. The last slide has my contact information. You're welcome to reach out. and I'd be happy to take questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And great presentation, Kevin. Thank you very much. A lot of really important information. And I think to expand on that, we're going to turn it over to Gina and Stacy. Gina or Stacy, you want to share Gina's slides of her presentation?
Yep, I'm pulling them up right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Can you see them?
Yes.
I can, yes.
All right.
All right. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I'm glad to be here to talk about our perspective as an electronics recycler working in Connecticut about what's going on with computers. What do we do with them? What do we do with our electronics, our TVs? What's working, and maybe where can we possibly improve? I'm the CEO and owner of Take-Two. My husband and I have been in electronics recycling for a long time, since 2003. We were doing electronics recycling before the extended producer responsibility laws existed. We were doing a lot of local collection events for HP back in the day. And we were also doing them all along the East Coast. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. We were doing a lot of recycling for Apple before Apple became the giant that it is now, right? And then that business, We Recycle, grew, and we actually went through a really difficult time in 2008 with the financial crash. And we wound up taking on investors, Hugo New Corporation, and they wound up putting in a ton of money to We Recycle. We had about $40 million of processing technology at that plant. And we wound up, my husband and I, just having much less equity because of the amount of money that they put in. We're not rich, and we never added up that amount of equity to kind of maintain control. So after a while, it kind of became like the teenager that went off to college and you looked at and scratched your head and said, "Who the hell are you?" I'm not sure I want to do that anymore. And so eventually we left We Recycle, and it wasn't until We Recycle didn't get approved as a Connecticut covered electronic recycler that we said, oh my gosh, we should probably do something again. And we were initially interested in buying their Connecticut, their Meriden location back, because we wanted to save those jobs. As Kevin said, you know, this recycling law has created jobs in Connecticut. And because they were at the time the only approved Connecticut recycler, we were really worried that those jobs would be lost in Meriden. And they didn't want to sell it to us. So we called a bunch of our former municipal clients and said, if we build it, will you come? And they said, yes. So we started Take-Two. And right now we are serving a majority of the municipalities in the state of Connecticut. Our model is to be the most responsible, the most reliable, and the easiest people to deal with for all of our customers. We really do internalize that convenience aspect of recycling, and we want people to feel that their mind is at ease when they send it to us, that it's being managed the right way. Our employees are safe. The material is recycled responsibly, and we're working with them to improve their programs along the way. Right now, we have over 50 employees. I'm very proud to say that our workforce is very diverse. We have most of our management are women. We have about probably 60% of our employees are Hispanic or African American. We have about maybe 15% of our employees are adults living with some type of disability. Our actual location is in the Easter Seals building in Waterbury, and it just felt like full circle for me to be in that building that was a workshop for people who were working with disabilities, to be able to provide training and job opportunities in a mainstream environment for people who have incredible abilities. And so we're very proud as well to be the only covered electronic recycler in the state of Connecticut. There's definitely people in the state doing recycling or refurbishment, but they're not a covered electronic recycler. And the reason for that is probably because our program is rigorous, and you have to be doing it the right way. You have to walk the walk, and you have to talk the talk, and you have to be able to prove that what you're doing is sustainable. And it's not always easy for recyclers to do that. It costs more and it takes a lot of effort, but it's absolutely worth it. So you can go on to the next slide. Is that the second slide, Stacy, or is the first slide what's covered? What's after this one? Go ahead. Okay. All right. So expanding on that, why Connecticut's electronics recycling program works. The Connecticut program is managed by the State Regulatory Authority. It's managed by Connecticut DEEP. That's so important because they're incentivized. Their whole mission is to make sure that things are handled in a responsible way environmentally. And the people, the companies that are working in the program and approved by the state of Connecticut have to demonstrate that they're upholding these rules and regulations and practices, and they can be eliminated from the program if they're found to be managing materials or inappropriately, or not doing something in accordance with the statewide program or the law. And so the difference between this and a program that's managed by the manufacturers is, I think, the motivation, the underlying factor. The regulatory authority wants to make sure that things that are collected in their state are managed properly and don't result in contamination or further contamination because things are managed improperly. So they are willing to vet those recyclers. They're willing to inspect those recyclers. They're willing to maintain a relationship where they're understanding the cost of doing service in the state of Connecticut. And they are the ones who are approving the pricing for the program. Whereas in other states, the manufacturers more so manage the program, or a collective of manufacturers manage the program. And the motivation the underlying reason they want to do that is to manage costs, right? So are manufacturer-led programs incentivized to collect as much as possible? Probably not. Are they incentivized to pay a reasonable rate for responsible recycling? They're really not. Their programs are really difficult for recyclers and difficult for people in the program to continue to have sustainable, consistent recycling practices throughout the year because the costs for the program aren't necessarily being met by the manufacturers who run them. There's also a lot of transparency in a program that's managed by the state regulatory authority, whereas in the manufacturer managed programs, it could be difficult. And I'll have some examples for that as we go through, but I just kind of wanted to go through what we think are the 4 basic things that work really well in Connecticut. And I think first and foremost, it is that it's managed by the state regulatory authority. The second thing is that recycling in Connecticut is truly free and accessible for all residents. It's not just free for residents to drop off computers. It's free if you drop off a cathode ray tube television, a giant projection TV, a broken flat screen TV, a clunky old partially broken printer. It's free across the board, not just for computers and laptops. And if you do a call to some of the recyclers that are on lists for like New York's.gov, and you go on their website, you can look up a certain recycler and you could say, can I bring my electronics there? And they could say, yeah, well, what do you have? And you could say, oh, I have a printer. And they'll say, okay, what else do you have? I have a computer. They say, yeah, we'll take that. And you ask if it's free. They say, yeah. And I say, okay, can I bring my TV too? And they say, no, we don't take the TV. You'll have to look online and see where they take those. Well, the fact is they don't take them very often. And it's usually just at periodic collection events. If you miss it, you're still having to hold on to that TV or come up with another solution. So free and accessible is a huge reason why it works. When you go on the Connecticut website, it lists every single collection location. It clearly lists who the covered electronic recyclers are. You know where your material's going. If you drop it off in Essex, you know it's coming to Take Two, and you know how it's being managed. Everything is so transparent. Whereas if you go to, I just called a location in New York, in Putnam County. They're having a collection event on October 4th or 5th. And I said, who is the recycler? And they couldn't tell me. So that was disturbing. Whereas in Connecticut, if it's an approved collection event that's operating under the law, it should be very clear who's managing it, where it's going. And also just free and accessible, you know, to have something out there like one place or 2 places in Connecticut, that's not going to cut it. It's not free and accessible for everyone. So we're really looking at, in the state of Connecticut, what makes it free and accessible? What makes it accessible to people who are in urban environments? What makes it accessible to people who are in rural environments? What happens when a town doesn't really have a transfer station? How do they make it accessible? How do they make it easy? How do they make it clear for the residents to recycle? And I think our state does that really well. Another reason why it works in Connecticut is because we don't have quotas. Okay, so what are quotas? In our state, manufacturers have to pay for every pound of covered electronic devices that are picked up, whether that is picked up on January 1st or December 30th. All year long, that program is supported because everything we pick up, we bill the manufacturer according to the law. We have things that we have to, information we have to provide them and such. But as long as we do that and we provide that information, they are required to pay us for the material that we pick up, regardless of how much we pick up. So we could pick up 10 pounds, or we could pick up 100 pounds, or we could pick up 1,000,000 pounds. They need, when we submit the bill, they have to pay the bill, or they're not going to be able to sell their equipment in the state of Connecticut. There will be repercussions imposed by the state management program, by the DEEP, against their ability to sell. If you go to other states, like I think New Jersey, they have quotas. So the program might not run quite as efficiently after the manufacturers have reached their quota. So if your market share in Connecticut is, if your market share is 20% as a TV manufacturer, you have to pay 20% of the total pounds that we pick up of TVs, okay? In a quota-driven state, there's a number assigned to you based on your market share. So your market share is 20%. You only have to pick up X number of pounds, or have to pay to recycle X number of pounds, that equals 20% market share. After that, you're not required to pay to recycle equipment. So what you could imagine as a recycler, I don't know how I would plan my business if I didn't know I was going to get paid for material as things went on. And then the recyclers, it works that the recyclers are being paid by the OEMs. So again, this is when we submit an invoice to the manufacturers, it's a very streamlined system. And the, whoa, what's happening? You just went through all the slides.
Hold on. Sorry about that. I was just going to jump to the, we have a
Go
whole,
back to the slide we were on. Yep. I'll let you know when you're going to. Sorry about that, guys.
sorry about that. Here we go.
Okay. So we get paid by the recyclers, and it's a very streamlined, or by the manufacturers. It's a very streamlined program. We send them the bills, and in most cases, they send us a check pretty quickly. In other cases, they take a long time. And in this instances where there's difficulty getting paid, again, because it's managed by the state regulatory authority, instead of having a debate with the OEM, we're able to go to the regulatory authority, and they are able to liaison, really, between the OEM and ourselves to rectify any potential issues that might come up. Okay, next slide. So Kevin covered this, so I'll go really quickly. Connecticut requires municipalities to provide free and accessible recycling for computers and laptops, monitors, printers, and televisions, all kinds of televisions, flat screens, cathode ray tube televisions, projection televisions. And in most cases, municipalities are also accepting other devices, DVD players, stereo equipment, video games, all kinds of other things. And those are called non-covered devices. Those are things that the municipality, that the manufacturers do not reimburse the recycler for. Next slide. So Kevin went over this too. And it's funny, I think word for word, we were going to say the same exact thing. You know, originally, the state was collecting about 3 pounds per capita, and then we had a spike. And I think that happened because that was a few years in, and residents were getting educated. They were learning that their towns had collection programs and that it was easy to recycle their equipment. And so they started recycling. And I remember the amount of cathode ray tube televisions that were coming at that time, and the giant projection televisions. We had so many projection TVs. These are giant, heavy, clunky devices, and we saw them coming out in droves in that from 2014 to 2016. And I agree with Kevin that we have seen the devices becoming smaller and lighter. And so we are still filling up our trucks. We are still seeing a huge participation rate in the towns. We're seeing enthusiasm among the municipalities in recycling. But we're seeing lighter equipment, more flat screen TVs. And as much as you would think that would make our life easier, the flat screen TVs are more labor intensive to take apart and have their own set of challenges than the cathode ray tube televisions. Next slide. So again, what are the problems with manufacturer-run programs? So one of the things I did today was I did some research on another state that's a manufacturer-led program, and I called and I wanted to see who was doing the recycling for their collection event. They couldn't tell me who. I had to go to 3 different departments in the town to finally get someone who told me the name of the company. And the company is out of state. It's from New Jersey. And I thought, wow, that's interesting that this company is not listed on the New York website. They're not listed anywhere as participating or being approved in the state of New York, and yet they're doing a collection event for free. They're from New Jersey, and they work primarily in states that have quotas. So what are they doing with this equipment? No one knows, right? They're potentially doing the right thing or not. It's really hard to tell because it's very, you have to be, people call those of us who are, concerned about the environment tree huggers, right? But you literally have to be a tree hugger in the strongest sense of the word to find out what's happening with your electronics in some of these programs. And then they list, if you just go, I'm using New York because it's a neighbor of Connecticut, but if you go to newyork.gov's website, there's lists and lists of all these collection locations, and then you call them and they don't accept TVs, they don't accept monitors, it's not actually a drop-off location, it's a FedEx location. And you have to then go through other hoops to get mail-in things, to get it back to a national recycler that's completely anonymous and you don't know who they are. So there's definitely some challenges with the manufacturer run programs, just in transparency and clarity, in convenience and accessibility and all of that. I looked at Putnam County. There's no drop-off location in Putnam County as a permanent drop-off location. So what do those thousands of people do? Where do they go? Next slide. So we talked a little bit about how the manufacturer-run programs versus the state-run programs are not as sustainable. And this story about Total Reclaim just hit such a chord with me because, like I said, we've been recycling for a million years. And Craig Lorch, who was the president of Total Reclaim, was one of the poster children for responsible recycling. He was involved in e-Stewards in the Basel Action Network. He was on the multi-stakeholder group to develop standards for R2. He was doing it the right way for so long, and really just a great guy. And he got into a situation where he was unable to get paid the rate he needed to responsibly recycle the equipment that he was collecting. And he started making some really bad choices. He's not a bad person, right? But he's making bad choices. He made choices that got him arrested, resulted in environmental impacts or health impacts we don't even know, because he was exporting material to Hong Kong and who else knows where, because it was the cheaper way. And so I look at that as anytime somebody's saying what's better, a state-run program, a state-managed program, or a manufacturer-run program, I think of Craig Lorch. And he's a person I could never imagine doing what he did. And I know he had to be really in the depths of despair to do what he did. Next slide. Also, Closed Loop. Closed Loop was another poster child. They were eSteward, R2. They were seen as a responsible recycler. They kept saying that they were going to create a process for glass. They were, unfortunately, what they did was they just accumulated a lot of glass and left mountains for people to handle. And again, a lot of them are in locations where the state regulatory authority is not as strong as Connecticut Deep. And so I think some of these situations get so far out of hand before somebody realizes it and does something about it. And then you're dealt with a cleanup, and an expensive cleanup, for a long time to come, and lives are somewhat destroyed in many cases. Next slide. So what does free and accessible mean, right? We're talking about one of the things that works for us is that it's free and accessible. Next slide. In Connecticut, almost all of the municipalities have a permanent collection location, a drop-off site. It might be their transfer station, recycling center, or it could be at a retail location or a park that has a container and hours that it's manned. And basically, it's a very simple way to have a collection. It's set up with containers inside the container for all of the covered electronic devices, and for non-covered electronic devices in most cases. Everything is labeled, dated, safely stored in Gaylord boxes. And then when employees go to pick it up, they're making sure things are packaged properly, sorted properly at the point of collection. They're wrapping it up so that it's safely transported and there's not breakage on the way to recycling. And then those things are brought in and brought into the recycling facility and categorized right then and there at the time of collection. There's also collection events, which in some cases, a collection event is the only form of recycling in the town. Maybe it's a small town and they don't have a transfer station. And in other cases, collection events are supplemental to a permanent collection event. So when you talk about being in a rural setting without a transfer station, to have a monthly or a quarterly or an annual collection event makes it so easy for residents to go in, they drive up, the staff, our staff, unload the car for them. They never have to get out of the car. And then everything is responsibly wrapped up, labeled, dated, packaged on a truck, and brought directly to our recycling facility in Connecticut. And for those that do have a permanent collection location, a collection event is a wonderful way, especially in urban areas, to serve people who don't have access to a car, you know, don't have access to a truck, are taking their things via bus, right? Or something like that. So it could be very difficult in an urban environment to get your big TV or your computer to the one permanent drop-off location in the town or in the city. So collection events, we show up and we do block events, like at the corner of X and Y Street, so people can walk their equipment down. We've done that in the city of Waterbury. We've done that in New Haven where there's cleanups. We do them in mall parking lots, at church parking lots, school parking lots. And it's typically places where people are already very familiar. They know how to get there. And it's in many cases closer than getting to the transfer station. And then because we're in Connecticut, we have a drop-off location in Waterbury. And it's at our location. And we found that, you know, some residents feel comfortable dropping off at our location because they know they see us there. And to drop off your computer at a transfer station, they have to trust that it's going from that collection bin to us and that nobody's scavenging in that collection bin between the time that they drop it off and the time that we pick it up. And, you know, I would worry about that myself. You know, I wouldn't want to leave any data containing device necessarily at a transfer station. So we recommend that people pull the hard drives and that they can either mail them to us, they could drop them off to us, or they could bring the hard drives to a collection event and they'll be securely transported to Take Two. So as you can see, we've collected over 500,000 pounds from collection events and over 9 million pounds at transfer stations. And we are open and just really started collecting more at the drop-off location at Take Two. And we're about 70,000 pounds last year at our transfer station, at our collection location at Take Two. Next slide. Okay, so quota problems. Okay, why are quotas unsustainable? If you go to the next slide. So as I said before, in our program, TVs are billed based on market share. So I bill a manufacturer for the TVs that I pick up based on their market share. The difference in quotas is a manufacturer pays for recycling only for their market share. So it's confusing because it sounds the same, but it isn't. The difference is they have to pay for recycling the entire time. If it's 10% market share, they're going to pay 10% of the volume I pick up all year. Whereas in another state that has quotas, they're responsible for picking up a certain number of pounds in a year based on their market share. I hope that's clear. If it's not, we'll try to figure that out later during questions. But as a recycler, and I mean, I have had a couple of friends who were in the recycling industry who worked in state programs that were quota based, and they would say, I can't set up a permanent collection program here because it will work in January, but it might not work in August because I'm not going to get paid for what I pick up in August. They're not paying any longer. They're not answering my phone calls. And that's really difficult. So it doesn't jive with what the laws say. The laws say there should be a permanent collection mechanism, but it's very difficult for the recyclers to forecast what they're going to get, what they're going to pick up, whether or not they're going to get paid, if the payment is consistent. So those quota programs make for unsustainable, inconvenient programs that run in the beginning of the year, but not at the end of the year, that are sporadic and that are not predictable. Next slide. So in Connecticut, the OEMs have to pay their bills in order to sell their equipment, right? Now, we have actually run into a situation with one OEM who just seems to always have a lot of questions, always seems to delay in payment, has wanted to audit us numerous times. And, it's like a delay tactic because they want to be a thorn in our side because they don't like the program, because it's costing them money. It's costing them money because we can go out and we could collect every day because that's how our program is run. So I would say one of the most important components that work in our program and that should be maintained is the oversight by the state regulatory authority. And I think that the state regulatory authority needs to be very firm, and they need to really not allow for the OEMs to hold recyclers who are in the program hostage, because I think that could be something that really negatively impacts our program. Next slide. So what could be improved? Increasing awareness. We know that people are getting the picture. They know that they're learning that this is happening. They know that they can go to the state's website, the DEEP's website, and get a list of where things could be recycled. But at the same regard, we go to collection events and they're like, wow, this is so great. I didn't know you did this. Or they'll come to an event that we're doing, like an educational event, and they say, I didn't know it was free to recycle my electronics. Now, when somebody says, I didn't know it was free to recycle my electronics, and we're years into this, it's because there are recyclers out there who are charging, right? But they're not covered electronic recyclers. So one of the things that they need to be aware of is they need to choose a covered electronic recycler in a program that's actually sanctioned by the state, right? Not just send things to some guy in a truck that isn't approved by the state of Connecticut. And those are out there. Also, what we do to improve awareness is we work with kids, and Stacy does a fantastic job through our ambassador program. We work with schools and we get kids really excited about recycling electronics. And so, we continue to do that. They talk to their parents about recycling. And I think that when they go home with this information, they're sort of the next champions of the cause for the next generation. Next slide. The other thing that we need to do, and I won't go into this in depth because Kevin did, but we really need to tell people that scavenging is a major problem. Next slide. We've seen this we do trainings every year with all of our municipalities. We sit down with the transfer station attendees. We talk to the recycling coordinators. We do educational events in the towns, and we talk specifically about why scavenging is a problem. When you bring your computer or your phone or your smart TV potentially to a transfer station, there's an agreement with that transfer station. They have entered an agreement with a covered electronic recycler. That covered electronic recycler is going to manage all that material in accordance with the law. It's going to be responsibly recycled. Data is going to be destroyed. And we take that very seriously. Now, if a transfer station attendee, or even if it's at an event or something, if people allowed residents to look through bins and take what they want instead of that going to the recycler, it really is jeopardizing the security of the resident who dropped that item off for recycling. And the resident really should have confidence that when they drop it off at the town, or if it was a different recycler doing a collection event, if they did it at a collection event, that it's going directly to the recycler and it's being managed in accordance with the law. And like Kevin said, for a transponder to be put on a TV and it goes from a transfer station to a home, it never got to the recycler. So it really never, if it went to a swap shop, it never entered the program. But if it goes into that container, it entered the program and it needs to go to the recycler. So we'll be working even more with municipalities on why that's important, because if there's a disconnect, it's probably just because they don't understand why scavenging is a bad thing. And so we will be working to make sure our municipalities know that even more. Next slide. We were also talking about what would work is expanding. What would be an improvement is expanding covered devices. We don't know. Things are coming up like 3D printers. I don't think 3D printers were a thing when this program first started, right? So, we need to be looking regularly at new electronic devices that are in homes and say, well, should that be added? 3D printers are one of them. Also, more and more people are working from home. Students are going to school from home. So not just printers like the little LaserJet printer, but fax machines and all-in-ones. Those are things right now that every household uses, not for, they're not business generated equipment, and they should potentially be added. And that would help. That would help reduce costs for residents in recycling. It would help recyclers be able to provide that service for free to residents. Next slide. And then I think I'm probably over, so I'm going to go real quick. Expanding covered entities. Right now it's just households that are covered, and it's 7 devices. We get calls every day from small businesses. We're talking about, a realtor who has, 2 or 3 people in their offices, or a hairdressing, hair salon that has, it's one hairdresser working in the hair salon. Churches, schools, police departments, fire departments, and other municipal entities. If these were covered, especially small businesses and non-for-profit organizations, it would make it a lot easier for them to do the right thing. Right now, it's very difficult for small businesses to find a solution, because I could tell you, when I work with businesses, it's going to cost a business probably $200 to $500 just for me to come out. That's a pickup fee. That doesn't count what I'm going to charge for the disposal, the recycling, the data security, the asset tracking, and all of that. Now, for a small business that's got 1 to 5 employees, they can't afford it. So what do? I'm not sure what they're doing, but I know there's someone who's left out. And the same thing for nonprofits, schools, churches. They're really at a loss, and they don't generate a huge amount of equipment. All of the equipment that they have is end of life, well used, handed down from, the president of the company, then gives it to, somebody who works there, to a secretary. These things are old and obsolete. There's no reuse in them, and they need to be responsibly recycled. So those entities really could benefit a lot from being included in our law. And next slide, this is wrapping up now. We just kind of wanted to talk about specifically how the river cog towns are doing. And we work for 16 of the 17 river cog towns. We work at their transfer stations. We're seeing 825,595 pounds of e-waste collected, with a regional population of 170,593. So that's 4.8 pounds per capita in the river cog. So if you look at the state overall, our state overall numbers might be in that 3 pounds per capita, but the river cog is doing 4.8 pounds per capita. So we attribute that to, they're doing a great job educating their residents. It's really, truly convenient. It is truly accessible. And then we look, what's the difference? Like, we've got in the river cog towns, we've got Middletown, we've got Killingworth, right? So Killingworth is doing 8.8 pounds per capita, and Middletown is doing 2.14 pounds per capita. So this again is something that we need to look at, not just in when we talk about pounds per capita going down because the devices are getting smaller. Pounds per capita are less in less affluent communities, right? So if you look at some of the more affluent communities in the river cog, when you look at a house like that is a 5-bedroom house, where, there's a TV in every room, every person who lives there has a laptop computer, you've got two printers at your house, everybody's got a tablet, everybody's got a cell phone, you've got a lot of electronic devices, and you could afford to buy new ones readily and quickly. My TV doesn't stream Netflix easily. I need a new smart TV. Easily go out, get a new one, and recycle the old one, even though it's working. And more in more urban areas, areas where you don't have the affluence, they have less computers and electronics in their municipality, in each household. And they're also using them, they're giving them to relatives and friends to use. So I think the pounds per capita are less because they have less per household and they're using them longer. And then I would just say that in Essex specifically, we collected 5.3 pounds per capita for a total of 36,000 pounds. And their transfer station is open Monday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays, 7 to 3. So they have a lot of convenience. So we see a lot of convenience in those towns, a lot of varying hours and different makeups for how to do the collection. So with that, I have no idea how long I went. Am I way over?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
With that, I'll hold off for questions.
Yeah, we'll do questions at the end. But Gina and Stacy, thanks so much. An awful lot of information, a lot of it very valuable, and it integrated well with what Kevin provided. And at this point, quickly, I'm going to turn this over to Pam, who will kind of summarize a lot of this. And Pam, I'll leave it with you right now. I think you're sharing your screen. Good. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Hi, everybody. So I'm Pam Roach. I am the president of the Connecticut Recyclers Coalition, and I work with the South Central Regional Council of Governments, which, by the way, Take Two serves 14 out of 15 of those towns. Still trying to get that 15th town, not sure what they're thinking. And I work on regional services in the areas of solid waste and recycling, materials management, includes food waste diversion, energy conservation as well. I'm working with Daphne Dixon at Live Green on getting electric vehicles into municipal fleets in the SCROG region. So I worked with Gina at Take Two as their legislative program director previous to my work at SCROG, and with the town of Hamden as their solid waste and recycling manager, and which of course included electronics collection at the transfer station and electronics collection events in Hamden. I initiated Hamden's Earth Day celebration that drew 4,000 people, 100 exhibitors. Gina, you were there back in the early days there, but going back 15 years. I don't like to count the numbers. But that was a great celebration of free activities, free shows, Your Voice Galore. And so there's that. So you could see a little bit about CRC. I'll get to that now. You can read that. And we were formed in 1989, and we assist members in improving the efficiency of their own programs, educating the community, advocating policies and programs to make recycling more effective and economical and robust throughout the state. I'd like to introduce to you our CRC Board of Directors. So I am the president. Jen Heaton Jones is the vice president, and she is also the executive director of the Housatonic Resource Recovery Authority. CJ May is our treasurer, Waterbury Recycling Coordinator. You can see this is a very diverse group of people throughout the state. Dawn is at Yukon. Janice is at Rivercog. Janice Ehlemeyer. Dan McGowan, I know you're probably still there on the Zoom call here. He is currently with the Mattress Recycling Council. He was previously Branford Solid Waste Supervisor and signed on to Take Two during my time at Take Two. And additionally, he was the president before me, or CRC. Lori Vitagliano is Regional Water Authority, Government and Public Relations Specialist, so she does some lobbying. Lou Rosado Birch, Citizens Campaign for the Environment. He lobbies on important environmental legislation as well. John Phillips is the Director of Public Works for West Hartford. John Pizzamenti he's USA Hauling and Murphy Road Recycling, so a hauler. Tom Gaffey, Director of Recycling at Mira, which is going to be closing, which is causing the waste crisis, which is causing issues with our trash being shipped out of state to out-of-state landfills, which will be only increasing as they close down. Chuck Regal is the VP of Public Affairs at TAMRA. They provide reverse vending machines. Rich Ireland with the town of Plainville, also a Take Two town. CRC's administrator, Jim Leahy, Liberty Square Group, he provides us with tremendous support. Couldn't run our programs without him. It's been wonderful to have him on board. So you can see we have a diverse number of people here in really important positions that really help us with our membership and with the state overall, with moving things forward in working on waste and waste reduction. These are the type of members we have. We have municipal leaders from cities and towns throughout the state, professionals and citizens who are involved with recycling and sustainable management. We have, students and seniors as well as environmental professionals and citizens, nonprofits. I mean, it's all a good, nice group and diverse group of people. Let's see, whoops. So we participate in a number of different councils and groups in the state. So the Connecticut Product Stewardship Council, we played a key role in the passage of the electronics legislation and paints and mattresses as well. This year, there was a propane APR bill raised by the Product Stewardship Council led by one of CRC board members, Jen, on single-use pressurized gas containers. And there's a federal bill out right now that was is being introduced by Senator Udall. It's Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act of 2020 is what it's titled. It's a nationwide extended producer responsibility for packaging materials. some of which is outlined in the bill are basically promoting manufacturers to design their products for the environment, improving the responsibility in the design, collection, reuse, recycling, disposal, end of life for their products. Very important. Single-use plastic product bans. It includes minimum recycled content mandates for certain products and a national container deposit minimum of 10 cents. So that would be interesting. I'm going to quote him here. Basically, he says, today, producers have zero responsibility for their product waste. They have no incentive to reduce wasteful production and no incentive to create recyclable and sustainable products. So we're working on a letter. Lou Rosato Birch and I are working on a letter to draft from CRC to support at least some parts of that bill. We'll have to receive consensus from the board. But yeah, what something comes to mind that you said, Gina, about the manufacturers, not wanting, like, holding payment. This is a state law, and, they can maybe try to reduce their prices by just making their products better for the environment, right? Creating them and following this law so that they have, better content, recycled content in it, instead of complaining about paying. But that's a real problem. That's a real problem because they go 2, 3, 4 months, and that's a lot of money for those manufacturers that, especially, I know the one you're speaking of, they have a high market share. So, so anyhow, so then there's a solid waste advisory committee in the state that we're part of. And that was adopted in 2006. It was revised in 2016. The goal is a 60% diversion rate by the year 2024. It's now known as the Comprehensive Materials Management Strategy, the plan, instead of the Solid Waste Management Plan. They changed the title. But that's Connecticut Solid Waste Management Planning and Decision Making now through the year 2024. And they have a couple tiers with that. Tier 1 is, you have to either meet one of Tier 1's choices or 4 Tier 2's choices, so for reducing waste. And then the Tier 2 is EPR, electronics, mattresses, and paint. So that's an easy one for the towns because, there's an electronics container, I think, in every transfer station in the state right now. So that's a good one. It's nice to see that that's in there as one of the requirements. NERC consists of 11 states, from Maine to Pennsylvania to Delaware to Maryland, and we participate with them. They have training and outreach on source reduction and recycling, sustainable materials management. The National Recycling Coalition is 6,000 members. And again, they focus on promoting and enhancing recycling for the whole country. So the last one here, I want to go into just a little bit. This is the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. This is a coalition being led by Commissioner Katie Dykes. It's known as CCSMM. It's really hard to get that acronym correct. So there's Connecticut Deep and over 70 municipalities from across the state are joining to explore ways to reduce the amount of waste that's generated in Connecticut, to improve reuse, recycling, organics collection, and innovative solutions. It's created because municipal leaders are having pressing challenges: increasing costs of single stream recycling, the challenge of organic recycling, educating residents, recycling right, reducing waste, reducing costs. Sorry if you hear the train in the background. Because trucking waste out of state is not a good option because we're going to be trucking out of state more and more when Mara closes down, and that's to out of state landfills. So there's 4 working groups you can see here that have been being formed. They're going to meet every few weeks this fall, concluding on January 1. One of the working groups is EPR. There was a survey done. I'll show you a slide coming up on the EPR. That's why I list tires, HHW, propane, and packaging here, because those are the areas that the survey came back as being where people like to focus on. So we're gonna have an organics working group, recycling, and so the organics is going to be focused on looking at backyard composting, local composting, farms, anaerobic digestion, increasing recycling, how to capture more of that, glass pilot, bottle build, pay as you throw, save money, reduce trash, maybe a regional or statewide program. So the working groups are going to be interactive, and it's going to solicit input for proposed waste diversion solutions from advocates local stakeholders, service providers, developers. And we're going to share experiences and lessons. We're going to have by January 1 a menu of options. I say we, but all of us, right? They're going to have an equity and environmental justice lens on when we're creating this menu. Be sure that efforts do not disproportionately affect them, and ensure that we engage in their perspective and so forth. Webinars are going to be online and open to the public. So people that, if you wanted to look at EPR for electronics, say, and try to expand the number of covered devices or the number of entities we serve, the schools and the businesses. I remember getting so many phone calls from the small businesses in the schools as well. And when I was with Take-Two, and it was tough because, especially small businesses, how much money do they have to be able to pay for that kind of disposal, So it's rough for them. And there's a lot of other states that are including these small businesses and schools and fire departments and municipal nonprofits, churches. Churches. I'm like, I felt so bad. The church that called me, I'm like, really? So like, really? But this is from my residential home in the church, or whatever. We just print a little office. I felt so bad. I was like, oh my gosh. So and just to know, I in the middle here, I just want to say that I can't stress enough that this electronics program being vetted by the state is so important. It and just to repeat what Gina and Kevin have mentioned, it requires the electronics recyclers to recycle properly, and that they get paid for everything that they pick up and everything that they recycle. And, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have a limit on it, and that the fact that Take-Two is in the state, it's local business, it's Connecticut jobs, in-state, local, exceptional service, responsive, close by, very central in the state, can get to you quickly, in the scavenging, that's something we always have to work on. There was one town I went to, I don't know if I should really mention the name of the town, doesn't matter. Well, it does, because they were wonderful. They turned the containers for me because they were faced where the person that was in the booth couldn't see, in. So they turned it. And it was comical because it was a new public works director and everybody was getting used to him, and that's always something where people don't like to do that. When somebody new comes in, they're not happy. They're not used to the person. They don't like them. And I was afraid of this guy when I first had to meet him because I was thinking, oh God, this guy's terrible. Everybody's complaining about him. He's the nicest, best person ever. I work with him now all the time. And, with Scrog, and I'm like, oh my God, he's the best. I mean, I call him, he's like, oh, I'll get that person to come to that meeting. I'll get that person to do this. He came and he turned the containers around. There's no problem. Anyway, but it's awesome. It's all good. So can't say enough about the responsiveness of Take-Two and the way that you care. I mean, you care. I mean, like you mentioned some of these other manufacturers that are disposing improperly and just, I know the stories. And why would you go into business and then, I know money's strapped or whatever, but you do it well, you do it right. There's no way. Like you wouldn't put a screw in the wrong place. What the heck? You know what I mean? Anyway, I've been listening to Gina. I've been listening to Gina for 15 years. 15 years I've been listening to Gina. Back when I was in Hamden, you mailed me a tape. Do you remember that? You mailed me an 8-track. It was 8-track tape. It was 8-track tape, and a couple of them. About the China, everything, the electronics getting disposed of improperly in China, and I'm like, okay, because I wasn't working with that right then. I was in recycling, so you know what I mean. You want to make sure that I was going to be focused on that. That was so funny. So here's the survey that came back from the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management there, and you could see the numbers. And that's not my slide; that's their slide from their recent. Presentations. Let's see. So a little bit about Take-Two or Take-Two, CRC. ConnecticutRecyclers.com. Write that down because that is where you can register for our annual meeting coming up October 6th from 10 to noon. We'll have panel of experts discussing many challenges and opportunities presented as we head into 2021. you know, everything's virtual, unfortunately, because it's really, really great to be able to be in person with the annual meetings and annual conference, and the networking is phenomenal with our groups. But you know, we're working with it virtually. So we're going to be holding elections for the CRC Board of Directors. So if you are interested in serving on the CRC board, please put your name into nomination. You can email me or to the Connecticut, you know, see that email address there, ctrecyclers@gmail.com, or email to me. That's fine. If you want to put your name in. I know that we have one board member that's not renewing. I think she's going to retire soon. That's Dawn. And let's see. We welcome you. We'd love to have, you know, a number of you, you know, come and be on that slate. We have a webinar series that we've been putting on. It's held the fourth Thursday of the month for an hour from 10 to 11. And then in November, December, we're going to have it the third Thursday because of holidays. But we had Chaz Miller back in May. He spoke on the impacts of COVID-19 and the recycling markets. Chad's retired, but he had a career in waste and recycling that went 4 decades, and he worked at USP EPA and the Glass Packaging Institute, National Waste and Recycling. It was a good webinar. And then in June, we had Robert Klee, who many of you know is the former Deep Commissioner, who is currently a Yale University lecturer, or lectures at Yale. So does Esty, which I guess all the commissioners go to Yale afterwards, I don't know. And he discussed the growing amount of disposable PPE used in response to the COVID pandemic. People were, a friend of mine got tested, and the person that tested them stripped down everything completely off and put on a whole new set of PPE, a whole new set. I think that was in the beginning months, but I said, the whole entire, like, head to toe, they changed. Yep. Oh my God. So I think that calmed down, you know, but it's crazy. So our next webinar is Thursday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Did I say next Thursday? It's Thursday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. And we'll have more information about that on our website. So you can go there, again, ConnecticutRecyclers.com. So CRC membership benefits, and you've heard me say this already, we have lectures and workshops, and we have virtual tours now instead of the no-frills tours. We like to do the in-person, but what are you going to do? We have to work with what we can do, right? And so we'll announce more for the webinars coming up on our website. And then we're the voice and eyes for recyclers. Okay, we track legislation and government programs on behalf of the membership, share it through meetings, email, one-on-one communication, and our networking is priceless. You know, even with Zoom, even right now during COVID, I mean, you get around it. You still can make phone calls. You can still have Zoom meetings. You still can have phone calls. And through networking, we've improved programs, created partnerships, established relationships, ongoing dialogues, you name it. So, and then if you're a CRC member, you receive reduced rates at our events and our conference and our webinars. So in closing, I went too quick because I know that we're late. I'll say that here is your chance to add your voice to Connecticut's call for sustainable recycling and materials management. Join us. Join us. Be part of the voice. Join the CCSMM and be part of one of those working groups. If you want to, move forward on helping electronics go forward with, adding more devices, adding more entities. If you want to work on some of the other working groups, we have to move forward because we have to be able to take care of our own trash, and we're not doing that right now. So go to ctrecyclers.com to become a member, to register for the annual meeting and webinars, or reach out to me anytime. You see my contact information there. So thanks for your attention. I know we're running really late, and thanks for having me today. Yeah. So I'm going to stop my share. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, we try as best we can to adhere to our 1 hour time commitment, but sometimes the amount of information is so valuable and the information itself is so valuable that we have to go over. So thanks to all of you who stayed with us today. I have actually one question in chat, And we'll take an extra maybe 60 seconds to see if any other questions come through. But while we're waiting, this is a question, I guess, for Gina. And the question is, what does Take-Two do with the items that they collect? Are they disassemblers? Where do the different components go? So Gina, if you can
Yeah.
provide a little bit of information on that.
Well, that's a great question. And I'm glad you asked, because I think what sets us apart from other potential recyclers is that we actually take apart everything at our location. So we go out, we pick up at municipalities or businesses. We don't just work for municipalities, right? We work for schools, businesses, banks, hospitals, colleges. We're the we're the state contractor too. So we package it, we pick it up with our trucks. Our drivers are all trained. They all have background checks. They're all drug tested. They have CDL licenses. They take the equipment back to our facility. Our facility is monitored. It's secure. It's got video surveillance everywhere. Metal detection. The equipment comes in and it is taken apart at our facility. So the equipment that comes in from the Connecticut Municipal Program, the TVs, oops, sorry about that. The TVs are weighed as they come in, and all of the other devices, because the TVs are market share by weight, and then all of the other devices that come in go through each and every single device. And Pam could tell you, and so could Stacy, how many devices there are every single day. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Every single device is weighed. Every single device is taken apart. Every piece of data is physically destroyed right at our plant. And then our downstream processors, like for our smelters, for like the shredded circuit board material or the steel or plastic, all of that stuff is public information. You can get our approval packet through FOIA with DEEP and see every single thing. If anyone wanted to audit us, they could come to our facility and we will open up all of our books to you. You could see everything, including dates of shipments, verification of shipments, and so forth. We're completely transparent about what happens beyond our equipment, so that we have really, we want everyone to feel confident that the equipment is handled responsibly, recycled thoroughly.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks, Gina. I don't see any other questions coming up in chat, and I know we're about 45 minutes over time here. And again, you know, I thought it was valuable to keep this going. There's so much great information from these three facilitators that I thought it was worth, you know, just kind of hanging in there. And we appreciate you, all of your participation. So let me close with just a couple of closing comments. First of all, here's what you can expect from Sustainable Essex. We will be getting a resource sheet out to everyone who registered for this session. That'll include some links to some informative videos that will kind of round out a lot of the information you've heard today. There's also a link to a survey that we really would encourage you to take. It really has helped us in the past refine and improve our discussion series, and we plan to take a lot of those learnings into our 2021 series that you'll hear more about later on. So expect an email from me with that resources sheet. As far as the work of the CRC, I'll make sure that we get some forthcoming information rather about forthcoming events. I'll work with Pam on that so that you've got that information. What we'd encourage you to do is have a dialogue with your municipalities, and if to the spirit of expanding this program in terms of the materials that are recycled, et cetera, any feedback you could provide, you can run that right through me. We'll get that out certainly through or to the Essex municipal area, but also more broadly through both the River Council of Governments and the South Central River Council of Governments, and as well as through DEEP. So do not hesitate to reach back out to me personally. You'll have my email address when I send this information out to you. And, you know, we encourage that dialogue. So I want to just say thanks once again to Kevin, Gina, Stacy, and Pam for an awful lot of work they put into this, and their work on an ongoing basis in helping us in a difficult, challenging environment to manage our municipal solid waste. It's a real challenge for smaller states like Connecticut, and they're helping to lead us in a lot of really great ways on finding ways to better manage that. So thanks to the four of you for working with me on this today. Having said that, if there's no other questions, and I don't see any, we'll adjourn this session. And once again, my thanks to all the participants for staying with us today. I hope this was helpful to you. Please make sure you complete that survey, which a link to that will be on the document that I send you. And feel free to reach out to me at any time with feedback, comments, suggestions, etc. We really do welcome that feedback. So once again, thanks very much. And I wish all of you a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.